Hello all, Franklin here, and I thought that I would make this video basically discussing being a pastor and being an ISTJ and how the strengths and the weaknesses of this particular type play into my ability to be a pastor. Now, I am willing to bet that if we look at all 16 of the personality types, that all 16 of them are represented in the pastoral role. That being said, there are going to be some that are represented more than others. And as an ISTJ, what I have found is that, at least in my denomination, not highly represented. We're there, but not highly represented. And so I want to talk about how being an ISTJ, how that affects my ability to be an effective pastor. Now, for those of you that don't have a complete understanding of type, ISTJ, J stands for introvert, censor, thinker, judge. And it basically talks about how I gain my energy, which is through introversion, how I process information, which is through my senses, how I disseminate that information, which is through thought versus feelings, and how I order the world, which is I like a very orderly and structured process. So how does being an ISTJ, how does it help me to pastor, and how does it hinder me from pastoring? And let's talk about how it helps. Now first, from the perspective of organization, it's really important because things change so much or so quickly. 1 minute you have your plan down and you have your day or your week planned, and all of a sudden things happen that change it. And that happens quite often in the pastoral role because emergencies happen. There are times when people get ill. There are times when people pass away. There are times when people are in crisis. And it doesn't matter what your plan is. You need to scrap those plans and you need to be that person's pastor. They need their pastor at that point. They don't care about sermon preparation. They don't care about Bible study preparation. At that moment, they need their pastor. And that is what you have been called to do. So from that standpoint, where organization helps with that, is it's good to be an organized person who knows several weeks in advance what you're going to preach on. And that's what I do. I generally preach in series. So generally I'll know at least the basic scripture text that I'm going to preach on in advance, and that helps. I'm actually in the process now of trying to have at least 2 to 3 weeks of outlines. Not the sermon text, and I preach from an outline anyway, but of outlines on what I'm going to preach on, and then the week that I prepare to preach, actually tweaking that outline. Haven't done that yet, but what that allows is when those emergencies situations or those pastoral situations come about, you're ready. And so that organization helps. It helps in terms of preparation for Bible study as well. And I have gotten to the point now where I am not at all frustrated by changes or interruptions to my schedule. Before I got into ministry, and when I first got into ministry, that was an issue. I got my plans set. Don't interrupt the setting of my plans. That is totally unrealistic in pastoral ministry. So I would see the organization as my greatest strength. And to be totally honest with you, I wish that I was even a little bit more organized in terms of remembering, for instance, to check my calendar on a daily basis so that I don't forget appointments, because I don't have an executive or a personal assistant that can help me with that. I do have a wife, but sometimes she's busy doing other things. Now, I would also say that being a thinker versus a feeler has been a help, but it can also be a hindrance, and the reason it can be a hindrance isn't because the thinking is bad. The reason that it can be a hindrance is because there is a perception of what the pastoral role looks like and how a pastor should be. And there's this perception that the pastor, in order to be successful, needs to be a feeler. And what we have to understand about thinking versus feeling is that it isn't that the thinker doesn't feel. It isn't that the thinker doesn't have empathy. It's in how they choose to make decisions. A thinker makes decisions based on, okay, this is what's set before me, this is how the rules are set up, and this is the most logical decision. And that is good. It's a good way to make decisions. The feeler makes the decision based on, okay, what is the possibility of this affecting someone else? How is this decision going to affect someone else? And that's a good way to make decisions as well. But it's honestly looked at, it's kind of funny because it's looked at, the pastoral role is often looked at as, well, you should be more feeling. And they're not thinking about, this has nothing to do with, do I have the ability to feel, or do I have the ability to empathize or sympathize with a person in a situation? All this has to do with is the way I make my decisions. And yes, sometimes I do consider mitigating circumstances in my decision making. And sometimes I do understand, because I am in the pastoral role, that it needs to be taken into consideration how this is going to affect people. But even in looking at how this is going to affect people, I have to make the decision that I feel is best for the body that I have been called to pastor. And my process for making that decision is a thinking process, not a feeling process. And I think that that has been a benefit, although I will admit that it has had its trials because of the expectation of what people think. I would say my greatest hindrance to pastoral ministry has been the fact that I'm an introvert. Now, how is that the case? I'll use this last week as an example. This has been a very trying and a very, this week has tested me, because it has been one thing after another. And it has been physically, mentally, and emotionally draining. I'm not a crier at all, by any stretch of the imagination, but this week, as we came toward the end of the week, I came very close to getting very emotional in terms of, just because I was so tired and so drained. And the issue with this is, in being an introvert, where do we gain our energy? We gain our energy from our time away. We gain our energy from our time alone. Pastoral ministry has both its introverted parts of ministry and its extroverted parts of ministry. And for instance, study, prayer, meditation, all of things which a pastor should do, those are our introverted times. But this has been a very extroverted week. It was one meeting after another, one crisis after another. And I had a counseling session on Friday, and the group that I was supposed to be counseling called and canceled, and I was so relieved that they had done that, because it was just one thing after another without the time or the ability to recharge. And you have to understand, as another part of my personality, I believe in being dutiful and doing what is expected of me. My wife is an extrovert, and she spends all day at home by herself. That might be changing in the near future, because although we don't have any children, my wife and I are in the process of getting all of the licenses and things that are necessary to adopt. And so we're going to adopt hopefully a sibling group of 2, because we want to make sure that they are able to grow up together and that they don't get separated. So that'll change for her. But right now she's at home alone. So, and she's an extrovert. So what does she want when I get home? She wants that time together. And as a husband, I need to give her that. But as an introvert, if I've had that week where it's been one thing after another, I'm spent when I get home. But it doesn't matter, because my personality says my wife needs this time. I need to make it for her. And so this week have gone to bed, and I have been absolutely exhausted. And so it's it's been rough. It was a rough week. And that's, again, because I'm an introvert. And because of that, I gain my energy from the time alone. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't every week in ministry. There are weeks when I come into my office here and I have plenty of time to meditate. I have plenty of time to pray. I have plenty of time to reflect on what I want to do or say in my sermon, and I'm totally recharged, and I go home and I'm able to spend that time with my wife, and it's not draining because I've been totally recharged by the day that I've been able to spend in solitude, which is an advantage when you pastor at a smaller church. But because of the nature of the pastorate and the nature of especially pastoring in a small community, I would see that introversion as being probably my biggest disadvantage in terms of my personality. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that I want to be an extrovert. I actually enjoy being an introvert. I remember watching Ann's video, and Ann said, "Why would anybody want to be an introvert?" Well, I actually enjoy it. My philosophy on it is that the world is full of more than enough extroverted, outgoing, and gregarious people, and I see extroversion, I see introversion for myself as being a strength, although in ministry it can be a hindrance when you have weeks like I've had this week. But in my belief, in my faith, but by the grace of God go I, and if I don't have the strength to do what I've been called to do, then I need to lean on the Lord and lean on God and ask God for that strength. So perhaps that's what this week was all about. Perhaps this week was reminding me that, yes, you've been called to pastor these people, but you're not going to do it on your own. You're going to do it with me as well. That's basically being an ISTJ and being a pastor, and some of the things, the strengths and weaknesses of my personality. Of course, again, no personality is perfect, and no personality is going to be able to have everything that it needs. Another thing that I think is important is to look at my leadership, who sits right over here. There's a desk over here, and for us to work together, because I've got a wide range of personalities that I work with, and to work with them and know what my weaknesses are and to lean on them as well. And I did this week. I leaned. I said, I don't know that I could take another meeting or another 2-hour drive or another counseling session. And they were there for me. So that's it. That's my take on being an ISTJ and pastor. And hope that it's given you some insight. God bless you.